mysterious and dramatic tone. What would you do if an ordinary evening stroll turned into your darkest nightmare? This is the story of the Vanishing Trail. It was on a chilly autumn evening, with the leaves crunching underfoot, that Lizzie decided to explore a trail she had always passed by, but never taken. The sign at the trailhead read, "Beware, restricted area." But curiosity pulled her forward, like an irresistible force. She figured the warning sign was simply a ploy to discourage trespassers. After all, how bad could it be? At first, everything appeared normal. Tall pines surrounded her, their swaying branches whispering secrets to each other. The orange glow of the setting sun painted the forest in dreamy, ethereal hues. Lizzie strolled deeper into the woods, enjoying the serene escape from her stressful life. But as the light began to fade, the air seemed to change. Everything grew unnervingly silent. Not the peaceful type of silence, but the oppressive kind, as though the forest was holding its breath. Even the wind that had danced through the trees moments earlier was now absent. Then came the shadows. They began to elongate, twisting and writhing as if alive. Lizzie noticed her own shadow wasn't behaving as it should. It seemed to lag behind her. She stopped, turned around, and saw nothing but darkness stretching down the trail. A chill ran up her spine, but she forced herself to laugh. "Just tired," she whispered, trying to dismiss her growing unease. She went further, ignoring the increasingly oppressive atmosphere. But then, she spotted something odd in the corner of her eye. Blurred figures slowly moving between the trees. At first, she thought her vision was playing tricks in the dim light, but the figures grew clearer. They seemed to be humanoid shapes made of mist, their movements sluggish, yet deliberate. Lizzie's throat tightened with fear. She tried to convince herself she was imagining things, the insufficient light playing tricks on her mind. And then she heard it, the faintest sound. Pause for dramatic effect. It was the crunch of leaves, but it wasn't hers. Someone, or something, was walking behind her. Lizzie turned sharply, her heart thundering. Nothing, just the empty trail. Her unease now morphed into panic. She decided to turn back, but as she did, something bizarre and horrifying occurred. The trail was no longer the way she remembered it. Where once stood tall pines marking her path, there were now only barren, skeletal trees whose bark appeared burned. The once soft, earthy trail was now cold, hard as stone, and riddled with cracks that exuded an eerie, pale mist. "What's happening?" she thought in terror. Desperately, Lizzie clutched her phone to call for help. No signal. Its screen flickered strangely before shutting off completely. Fear welled up as a low, guttural growl emanated from deep within the woods. That was no animal. It sounded beastly, unnatural. Lizzie's legs kicked into a frantic sprint, her breath rapid and shallow. She didn't know where she was running. Her only goal was to escape. The path seemed endless, looping back on itself in a cruel, repeating cycle. But it wasn't just the path. It was the sensation of being followed. That sensation chilled her to the bone. Shadows were sprinting after her now, moving impossibly fast. Yet she could not make out any form or face. Out of nowhere, the faint sound of a child's laugh froze her in her tracks. A chilling, distorted giggle that oozed with malice. Lizzie refused to turn around, her instincts screaming for her to keep moving. But suddenly, the giggle came from in front of her too, then to the side, and then all around. "Help me!" Lizzie finally screamed, tears streaming down her face. From the corner of her vision, she spotted an old wooden bench, a peculiar sight in such a desolate place. Next to the bench stood a lantern, flickering unsteadily. Uncertain if she was imagining it, Lizzie ran toward the only semblance of light in the oppressive dark. The lantern's glow offered her a meager sense of security. But as she approached, her footing suddenly gave way. The ground cracked beneath her, and she felt herself plummeting into a suffocating darkness. Lizzie landed on something soft yet cold. She looked around to find herself in a dimly lit underground cavern. She wasn't alone. Surrounding her were the same shadowy figures she'd glimpsed earlier, but this time they weren't moving away. They were inching closer. In a trembling voice, she begged, "Please, let me go." For a moment, everything froze before one of the figures stepped forward. It didn't have a face, but somehow she felt its intense gaze. It stretched out a hand, or something resembling one, toward her. Her world turned black as she screamed. When Lizzie woke up, she was back at the trailhead, beneath the "Beware Restricted Area" sign. Morning sunlight pierced through the trees, and the forest seemed ordinary again. For a brief moment, relief washed over her. Maybe it had all been a nightmare, but as she turned to leave, the lantern she'd seen near the bench now rested at her feet. Its light flickered ominously. Lizzie never spoke of that night to anyone, but from then on, the townsfolk noticed she was never quite the same. The once cheerful woman grew silent, her expression perpetually haunted. And as for the trail, locals began to say if you listen closely, late at night, you can still hear faint, distorted laughter echoing from its depths. So, would you dare to take a walk on the Vanishing Trail? Or would you heed the warning and stay far, far away? Closing statement. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Daily Scary Tales for your daily dose of fear and fascination. Dare to join us again.